Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Art Alliance for Contemporary Glass education series, Fired Up. We do this on the first Friday of each month. It's free and open to the public, and we try and share artists and things going on around the world in glass. If you enjoy today's program and haven't seen one of our programs before, please know that you can join AACG, and we actually have these Zoom programs every Friday. The rest of the month, it is exclusively for our members only. And we put all of those videos into a private video library just for our members. So once you join, you can log in anytime, and there are hundreds of videos there from glass masters, curators, galleries, exhibitions, museums around the world that you can enjoy and learn so much about glass. Now, I'd like to introduce our sponsor for today's program. I'm really happy to say that Rago Wright has agreed to sponsor this program today for us. Thank you, Rago. Rago Wright is a network of independently owned art and design brands with a national coast-to-coast presence, united by shared clientele, technology, innovation, and creativity alongside expertise and shared passion. As the market leader in contemporary glass, Rago Wright has over 3 decades of experience, hosting more than 25 auctions dedicated to 20th century glass, with sales exceeding $10 million for contemporary works alone. Rago has established numerous world auction records, including William Morris's Beatles with Flora vase, which went for $390,000 and $600 in May 2024, and Dale Chihuly's Persian ceiling installation, which went for $200,000 in January of 2022. Rago also features works by glass visionaries such as Lino Tagliapietra, Yoichi Ohira, Laura De Santillana, Preston Singletary, Tutzinski, and many others. To learn more, please visit www.ragoarts.com. Thank you again, Rago, for being our sponsor, and I'm excited now to introduce our featured artist for today's program, Tim Rawlinson. He is from the UK, an incredibly talented artist working both in blown glass and cast glass, and he's going to be sharing with us today not only his journey in glass and his work, but also will be taking us through the gallery space at London Glassblowing, who is a brand new gallery member of AACG, and we're really excited to have Peter Layton and London Glassblowing join us. So thank you, and Tim, please take it away.
Thank you, Demetra. Am I unmuted? That all good? Okay, I'll just share my screen. So yeah, thank you for inviting me to give this talk tonight. Yeah, my name is Tim Rawlinson. The image you currently see is my solo show that was here in London Glassblowing earlier in the year. And these are wall-mounted pieces, cut and polished. Sort of, I call them planets, sort of idea of my own solar system. And my Instagram is also on that page if you want to see a little bit more of what I do. But yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to talk tonight. I've been a resident artist here at London Glassblowing since 2011, and a degree before that. So I'll just give you a little bit of background. This is me as a kid. I was born in Bristol, England in 1985. Yeah, most of my time just playing around. I did art A level, but way before sort of was involved with glass, I was doing lots of painting. But I actually went to study architecture in Brighton, and that's sort of, I think that sort of follows through into my work. But you can sort of see here some of the structures that I'm sort of playing about with different model making. And the piece on the left is in glass. It was one of the pieces I then did when I finally went to study glass at university. I realized architecture was more of an inspiration than something I wanted to actually practice. I saw a glass sculpture exhibition in Brighton where I was studying architecture. And as soon as I saw these big, beautiful glass sculptures, that was it. I was transfixed. Looked up courses that I could go and study, and I sort of transferred straight away. But certainly that language has definitely stayed within my work. The funny thing is, when I first was trying to find out more about glass art and glass blowing, in the university library, the book I actually found was Peter Layton's Glass Art, and then I ended up meeting him many years later. So it was quite sort of nice bit of fate there. This image shows some of the things I was doing as a student. I was very into glass's sort of prisms and how the light then interacted with the glass, and that's still something that's very important with my work. But more things I was making as a student was lenses and different prisms shining light through them. And a lot of the sort of finished work was more photography of that moment. So this is sort of one of the little things that I made to work with refracting the light. And then these images are some of the more finished pieces. So the piece on the right is a photograph, and it's taken through a glass lens that I made with lighting behind it. And it's sort of quite sort of psychedelic imagery, sort of outer space and Hubble telescope imagery. And yeah, that was sort of, I spent a lot of my time sort of doing that in university. And on the left is it's a three-dimensional wall that's sort of made. And then one of the images created through the light projected through the glass is then projected onto that wall. So did a lot of live events for this. It was a lot of sort of quite involved in music at the time. I was a bass player, and I thought the band might take off any day, but didn't quite happen. But it was really fun playing with these images created with the glass lenses to then do live events and create a sort of very psychedelic atmosphere. And yeah, it was well received, and it was a lot of good fun. This is at my actual degree show. I was sort of prompted by my tutors that I would have to also make some actual objects rather than just projections and photography. So I had these pieces which were glass polished pieces that were suspended in a darkened space, and then they rotated, and you created these different shadows that moved in and out each other on the wall. So it was a sort of combination of those two ideas, which was greatly inspired by, for my dissertation, I went out to Berlin and I saw an artist called Oliver Ellison. He had a solo show in Berlin, and he had these hung glass pieces that slowly turned and projected light, and these different prismatic pieces. And he sort of considered light as an actual medium itself. And I was greatly inspired by him and another artist, an American artist called James Turrell. And he had an exhibition in London, the Gauguin Gallery, and he has these things, it's called a chamber, and you have to book an individual slot. You lie down on your back, and this sort of stretcher goes inside of a big globe, and these bright lights have sort of flashed at you on this stretcher. It was absolutely bizarre. It's meant to be, he had described it as seeing yourself seeing. For a while, you didn't know if it's the lights you were seeing or your own imagination projecting light. And yeah, those two artists were very influential for me at that time as being a student, sort of trying to work with these light installations, and also the idea of installational work. So these are the two pieces from the degree show on opposite ends. Both of these are hung and turning, and they create then these lovely sort of shadows on the wall that will move in and out of each other. So I met Peter Layton at my degree show, and I did my best to charm him and convince him that he should take me on in the studio, and gave me, I think it was a 3-month work experience. So it's me on the left, so when I first joined, and this is the team here, and he's working on big mold blown lampshades, which were to go in the Shard, which is a very big tall skyscraper that's here by the studio at London Bridge. And so you've got Lane Rowe here on the left, Louis Thompson, who's the blower, Hannah Enmark, who's then turning the pipe, and down at the bottom on the left is Bruce Marks, the studio manager, and on the right, Jochen Ott, who I worked in the cold shop with, who he sadly passed away a few years ago, tragically. But yeah, I was new to this team. This was sort of fresh out of university, and it was, you know, such an eye opener going from university to a proper professional studio, and being with all these other artists and glassmakers, all doing very different things, was just such a wealth of experience to gain from and learn from and be immersed in. And it was a very collaborative atmosphere, you know, people assisting each other and, you know, helping out when they could. And I mean, you can see in this photo the level of involvement and collaboration. So it was a great atmosphere for a student like myself to then come into. This work's called Echoes of Light. It's sort of one of the earlier ones, which has been the sort of most popular series, I'd say, to date. The idea is of, I think of glass as a vessel that holds light, essentially. And hopefully, and I aim to paint with light. So within this piece are colors which are just illusions. It's only got yellow, pink, and blue, but because they're transparent glass, the way the light goes through creates these purples and oranges and greens. So sort of a range of these pieces looking at these different color studies, and they're cut open with a polished lens. It sort of then helps create even more of sort of optical wizardry within. And a piece similar to this in different colors was then selected for a Coburg Prize in Germany in 2013. And being involved in that show and the people that, you know, for me at my stage of my career, it was a really sort of, it really opened me up to different pathways and to different exhibitions, which, yeah, things then just went on from there. So the piece on the left is another version of that sort of piece, series, which is called Light Vortex. That's this extra slice taken out of it. And that was accepted for the Lommel International Glass Prize in Belgium the following year. And here on the right, you can see where I'm mostly at work at the saw. Like I love the saw. I use it then as a sculptural tool. When I first saw you could cut glass on a saw, you know, it's such a what? And yeah, I transfixed with that way of working ever since. I think it's sort of human nature to sort of want to know what's inside of something. So a lot of my work is cut open to sort of expose those inner layers. Next part of the process after the cutting is then grinding. So it's a very large flatbed grinder that I had made a couple of years ago. A guy called James Devereux, I also worked with in the hot shop. So yeah, after each time I've sliced the piece, the next stage is to then rough grind by hand all the sides. This is a video of the cutting process. So this is a very large piece. I'll just let this play. I have to very tentatively cut into the glass, especially at this scale. You can see the depth of the saw, and you'll get the final break-off point in my reaction. A little jump. And then this is the final stage of grinding a base for the piece to then stand up. So most of my pieces, then they, you know, blowing iron, where it's attached normally on a blowing iron and where a punty would be, I sort of flip the axes 90 degrees to stand them up. So you can see them within, you know, they're not functional, they're meant for sculpture. This stage of the process is on the reciprolap. So this is the early stages of a polish. You can see all the weights that are on the edge counteract that angle. So you have to make sure something is evenly balanced to get the whole polish, to get the whole surface evenly polished. These machines have really changed the way that I'm able to work. I can work with such large scale areas and also large scale pieces that being too physical, but also the polish you can achieve with the reciprolab you just can't achieve by hand. So it really does mean it's a purely polished surface, and it's something that I think defines a lot of my work, but also my sort of craft is really that surface treatment and the finish that I'm able to get. I don't want it to distract anything. I want it just to be, you know, pure optical finish of the glass. This series is a parallax piece, so I was invited to make work for a show called Vetro, which then is meant to be contemporary glass using Venetian technique. So it was a really fun excuse to use cane work, but then with cutting the piece and polishing it means the layers of cane within are sort of multiplied multiple times. So with a lot of pieces where I'm just using pure color, you might not necessarily know that you're seeing an illusion or a bending of light, but when you're working with lines, it becomes far more obvious about that refraction. So that was this body of work. This partner in crime is James Devereux on the left. So he has a studio in Wiltshire in England, the Devereux and Husky Studios, and it's where I go to make my very large scale pieces. First did a show called Collect in London in Saatchi Gallery in about 2015. And specifically for that show, I wanted to sort of scale up my work. So I thought it'd give it more presence and power. So to do that, Mr. James himself went to the studio because that's what it specializes in, is making very large scale work, get longer annealing time, but also get, you know, his 20 years experience of being able to work in very large scale pieces. So we've worked at scaling up my designs and my work, and they were so popular that they've been scaled up ever since. They've never scaled back down. So yeah, I'll make all of the blanks I make all the layers of color here in London studio, and I take those, put the layers of color together with James in his studio in Wiltshire. I take the pieces back to London, where I set up a cold shop. I do all the cutting and polishing here in London. So yeah, it's me working with James on the left, and on the right is me, James, Devereux, and Elliot Walker. Elliot, he won series 2 of Blown Away. Yeah, and it's just a bit more about the sort of collaborative atmosphere in UK. There's not too many, it's not too big a scene, but it means that it's a very good community. So we work together on this piece of mine, which is called a hypercube. So that's a solid glass cube. It kneels for about 6 weeks. And it's got 9 separate components that are all put together. So I enlisted Elliot's help to help. The 3 of us spent 7 hours putting that together in the hot shop. But yeah, that energy and that sort of element of collaborative atmosphere in this country is really special. And James's studio is where you need to go if you want to make the big and the spectacular. They've enabled my ambitions of design to not be inhibited. He really will sometimes give me a look when I say I've got a new idea, but they're very supportive, and yeah, we've been able to really achieve some great things there.
Tim, if I could jump in just for 1 second.
Yes, of course.
Question from someone. The piece that you had in the previous slide, which was done in the hot shop, but it was solid. What would be the advantage of doing a solid piece that way as opposed to some of your other works that are cast in the same form?
It's a good question, and one which I'm about to explain with this next slide.
Okay.
So this is the finished piece on the right. So that's a solid cube. I had a similar piece at Duncan's, but that was cast. And this is the first iteration of it in the hot shop. And what it allows me to do is then put together these different layers of blown color, but have it so that it's just a veil of color. Whereas if you're using a billet and you're casting it, it'd be a solid lump of color. But here I'm able to grind through the outer layer, which allows it to be more translucent. And it means that when you see through these colors, the yellows and pinks to create oranges, all the primary colors to make secondary colors, I'm able to do that in a much more sort of delicate way. On the left just shows a lot of how my thinking. A lot of time it's just graph paper and crayons, sort of crude drawings, but much more sort of remembering an idea that I'm having. So yeah, that is a hot finished piece. And then this is one that's cast. So it wasn't meant to be cast. It was made in the hot shop, but even after annealing for 6 weeks, unfortunately, it cracked. Because what we're sort of doing with blown glass, you're not really meant to be doing. It's meant to be used for blown vessels. So making sort of 20, 30 centimeter thick cubes, there's a lot of sort of stress that goes into the glass, especially with working with different colors as well. So if we go on to the next slide, and I'll go back to this piece. So on the left of the picture is an artist called Bruno Romanelli, who's a glass sculptor. And I became his assistant for about 2 years, around about 2016, with the idea of working with someone who's just, you know, one of the chief glass sculptors in this country, but his cold working levels is incredible. So I predominantly went to try and better myself at my cold finishing. But obviously, as a glass caster, I was then exposed to that process. So this piece, when it cracked and I was working with him, he suggested that I should try casting it as a way of getting the glass molten again and removing the crack from that. I didn't realize that I'd get this beautiful movement of color and the way that it sort of almost becomes like silks and drapes. So this piece is called Tesseract, and yeah, this was a little bit later after the first one, once I sort of understood the process a lot more. But the benefit of the reason I was doing them in the hot shop was that was my process. That was how I worked as a glass blower, and that was the idea that I had. It was almost like making a very large marini. But then the casting sort of came through by accident as a way of trying to save or salvage the piece. But what I found was that blown glass color moves in a really curious way once it's then recast. So on the right is a mold with a cast inside, and you can see how far down it's sunk. So what I aim to do is, because I blow my blanks to be cast, it means I can create different air pockets inside. So once it becomes hot inside the kiln, the air bubbles are light of the glass, so they rise up, and that pulls and distorts the color within. So it makes these really beautiful fluid movements. I think of a lot of sort of ink dropped into water. And yeah, the reason I then use the casting is just to get that quality of the color. And I love that it's out of my control. It's chaotic. It's a one-off thing, and that movement is then frozen in time. I sort of try to think of the interior almost as a painting, a three-dimensional painting. It can be quite a frustrating process. It doesn't always do necessarily what I expect it to do, but when it goes right, I think the outcome is beautiful. So on the right is the final polishing stage. Finished image. So it's another cast piece. Actually, cane work that I cast, but then because it's sort of a retticello, you trap a network of bubbles. They start to rise once it becomes molten, and I feel it's almost like jellyfish sort of rising up as sort of achieve an underwater effect. For our honeymoon, we went to Bali and we did quite a lot of snorkeling and different things underwater. And this sort of the idea of these underwater worlds really appealed to me. So that was the inspiration for those pieces. These images are taken from a trip made in Japan a few years back. we did a pilgrimage walk with my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife. I actually proposed to her on this walk. And I had a solo show. My first solo show was after this. And the walk is called Kamano Kodo, and that's what I named the show after, because it was sort of based upon the experiences of that walk and sort of very beautiful things sort of crept up upon it. I was taken with Japanese design and sort of artistry, the craftsmanship, the levels that sort of things go to, I found remarkable. But different colors of the sort of autumn leaves when we were there, I found very inspiring. And then a lot of these, I really liked the stone lanterns, and some with like lots of moss growing over it. And yeah, it was a very inspirational trip. On the left is one of the temples I visited, and I love the raking they did of sand. And there was one that was sort of based on constellations. So in the show, this was sort of based upon the constellation Cassiopeia, and I got wood, sea, and seed to almost be like the raking involved in it. And then these were the individual pieces to mark the points of the constellations. And that's then one of the pieces. And also within the glass, I then was using cane work, sort of a wigwag technique, to get again that feeling of sort of raking through the sand. And yeah, that was what this body of work was about. The sort of use, like how it's an individual piece, it's still got that sort of wavy lines. So someone who came to my show was very taken then with that part of the design, and then they asked me to create a one-off mirror frame for them. And what sort of more surprising to me was they were from Florence. I sort of thought, oh, why don't you go to Venice? You've got that there, but it was quite a compliment that they then decided to ask me to design something new. So these are all individual glass pieces that include the edge of, I think it's about a 2 meter across mirror. It's a very huge mirror. And yeah, it was a long mission. There's quite stressful parts, especially the gluing job, but particularly like the image with the sort of sky above. So these pieces, this is the Echoes of Light series, and I started working with a photographer called Sylvain Delou a few years ago. And what's really nice working with new people, especially Sylvain, was we were photographing these pieces individually. We sort of got to the end of the shot, and he was like, "Can I take a photograph of a couple of them together?" I was like, "Yeah, of course." So then to put together these groups, and he started doing multiples. I thought the imagery was great, but it also made me realize, oh, actually, starting to work these pieces together in groups or pairs was a really interesting way of working. So you then have each piece reflecting within each piece, creating far more sort of layers of the color. So that took a whole sort of new dimension of these pieces. This particular composition was in the British Glass Biennale in 2022, and it won the People's Prize, which was very good, really very humbling for me. It was such a vast array of beautiful work, so to be selected by the public was really very, very pleasing for me. It was also, yes.
Sorry, Tim, to jump in, but
okay.
Could you please give us a sense of the scale of the works as you're showing them, so we kind of know a little bit better how these are in their presence
Sure.
and scale?
This isn't the biggest, but you can sort of get an idea then of the size of that.
Okay.
Done ones that are more like 45 centimeters across. Very largest one, so that would be 18 inches. And that was that. We only do that as sort of very special commissions. It's not something I don't like to work at that scale all the time. And then more the 30 to 40 centimeter diameter of those pieces, but they're very thick pieces. So there's a very dense, they're heavy pieces. So that limits the scale to a certain extent. And just physically, I don't want to be working at the maximum scale each time. But
All
yeah.
right, thank you.
This was an image then that Sylvan put together of the same piece at different angles. But the day I came to his studio, it happened to be the sunlight was coming through at an angle. So it then got these projections of light through the piece. And I think it goes back to sort of my interest in university of creating glass to create projections. Very often I sort of find that the projections of light that the piece gives out and the way it transforms its environment is often as important, if not more, than the piece itself. So I was really pleased that we were able to sort of capture these. Just we only had like a 15-minute window probably when the sun was coming at a right time, so sort of running around with these pieces trying to get images. But yeah, it did a fantastic job, and I just think it really captured the essence of what I want to achieve with these works. Of you have the piece, but then you also have the projection of light, and I find it really great to hear from collectors that tell me about how the light changes in their homes where they've got the piece and the dynamic that happens throughout the day with the shadows moving across. And yeah, it's a really pleasing part of these sculptures for me. This then is then more of an elongated version of that, and just sort of showing you how just from a different angle, your view with different viewpoint, that piece completely transforms just due to the optical nature of the glass. You know, the glass is a lot of the heavy lifting for me. It really is the just being able to use a large amount of clear glass, sort of let the glass do the talking, and think that the way it bends the light is really what attracts me to it as a material. This piece is called Parallax. So I find relationship with glass and water and the way it works with light very similar, and sort of very taken with take a lot of imagery of water, light reflecting on water, particularly in swimming pools. I always, like David Hockney paintings, I always find that intriguing. The piece on the right was sort of trying to get that fluidity into the work and sort of create that curvature. And then this piece was then taken for the Salon show in art design in New York, which was great. And they had that as the banner out in central New York. Little video of process of work, starting to work with frits and powders. Let this play through. Yeah, working with James. So this was part of the planets, which was the first image of the pieces on the wall, where it showed at the beginning how I sort of use a tool to distort and pull the color around, which then gives you this effect. So yeah, starting to work with sort of textured colors. Piece on the right is a Duncan Studio, something new made for the gallery. Again, feeling sort of underwater. So I was trying to sort of achieve the effect of marbling that you sort of have in fabrics and textiles. But I do feel they have a planet element where you sort of have the colored glass suspended amongst the clear, so it's like it's floating, and it then means all that clear then reflects that inner pattern beautifully within the skin. So trying to work in a new way with color rather than just pure color, using these frits and powders to create a sort of more texture feel into the glass. And then sort of a bit of inspiration of the Hubble telescope imagery of outer space. You had the new telescope recently, the Webb telescope, which created a whole raft of new imagery, which I've just found incredibly inspiring. I've always liked that sort of imagery. And then these particular pieces, that's something that has really informed that. This piece is Inner World. So yes, I had started showing in America a couple of years ago, first times. It showed first to the Habitat Galleries in Detroit. And then I was approached by Duncan McClellan Gallery in Florida. And I had a show there in February, and this was one of the works brand new works was made for that show, and proved incredibly popular with the people there, which was wonderful. Making some new works for them new season in September. And so it was using this sort of textured color of the outside skin, but then grinding these windows so it reflects upon a clear inner bubble. I call it a spherical cube because it's a sphere, but it has 6 flat sides. And the idea was an Escher etching where it's these 6 windows and there's a raven or a bird sat in the middle, but it's all reflected within. And that was the sort of inspirational starting point. Again, the idea of planets and inner worlds. And then this piece is called Other Worlds. So that's then a solid piece with a solid ball inside of one of these spherical cubes. And just, yeah, again, idea of planets, and I'll sort of I think too much about us on the surface of the planet and then universe around, and the scale of the things that it boggles the mind really. And I was like end of Men in Black movie when he has a keychain and it's got on it a whole solar system, but then it shows it is actually a solar system and inside a keychain. So I sort of quite like the idea of these inner worlds within the glass. New versions of the Echoes of Light series with these more oval and organic shapes called True in Light. So this has been selected for the 2024 British Glass Biennale, which opens next end of this month. And it was a lot of the inspiration was from going to a Barbara Hepworth show. So I have a picture here. So on the left is my daughter in her sculpture garden, and it's in Cornwall in England. So yeah, so it's Barbara Hepworth, a British sculptor, and she has her studio in St Ives. She has a sculpture garden set up, and I used to go there when I was a child. And going back there as an adult, I realized the effect that must have had on me as a kid, and absorbing that sort of imagery, and then the work that I sort of ultimately ended up producing. I think a lot of those apertures and different works clearly had quite an effect that lasted. So after that show, I made these new works, one's previous, and then the image on the right of these more sort of organic stone shapes, these sort of menhir shapes. That was very much influenced by a trip that I had there. Again, working with that more sort of textured marbling color. And then yes, another version of that for the Bob Hepworth show, but getting much more of that sculptural cut. So there was a bubble there. Not the greatest image, but I like the idea of then having a completely different color on the inside to the exterior. So starting to use opaques for the first time and making use the white then means you can have an entirely different color palette on the exterior to the interior. So there's some platters behind me, which I'll show you on the wall. So this brand new series of work that was made for current show. It's a duo show with Peter Layton. He's had a solo show every August. He invited me to join him in that. And these platters this is the details. The idea is fabrics is the starting point. So when we've been to Italy quite a few times the past few years, and a lot of the sort of Renaissance paintings, the religious paintings, what really struck me with them is the sort of folds and the fabrics and the robes, the light and dark elements, a lot of the sort of Caravaggio work, the Chicorizzo, the element of the light and dark. And I was trying to achieve that with the glass. in these platters. Yeah, sort of folds that you have in fabric and clothing. So this is one of the paintings we saw. You can then see what I mean, where they painted the folds in the fabric. And then this is then one of the resulting plates. Also wanted to get that crimped edge, which when I was in Florida at Duncan's, I had a trip to the Chihuly Museum, was taken obviously within the pattern that he'd done. I really loved the exterior edge. And I just thought that really works, the idea of fabrics and cloaks, this sort of thing. So it's an inspiring trip. So yeah, this is the current show, new body of work, which I'll give people a little tour in a moment, but it's currently on for this month. There's an online catalogue if people would like to see the works that are available. And this is Peter Layton on the left. So yeah, as I said, the first book I got out on glass art as a student was Peter Layton glass art. Managed to meet him as a student, come to work experience, and there I met his daughter Sophie. We're now married with 2 children. Peter's my father-in-law. Quite sort of believe in fate, or I think meant to be sort of quite full circle in that way. But Peter is a wonderful supporter of the next generation in glass, and he wants to ensure that this wonderful medium and art form is not lost, in this country. And he's sort of founding father of the sort of British studio glass movement after coming back from America in the 60s, where he was teaching. And he's been wonderfully supportive of mine and many other careers. He's 87 now, which you wouldn't believe if you met him. He's so full of energy in life. Sort of looking at the future and the legacy of the studio, and me becoming more involved with that and ensuring a future for London glass blowing in this sort of creative hub that we have here. So it's new things to come. And this is our sponsor, which I'll hand back over to Metra. Or would you like me to do the walkthrough first?
Thank you, Tim. And thank you to Rago Right Auctions for sponsoring this program. Before we get to the walkthrough, I just wanted to ask you a question that came into the chat, which was regarding color. Someone was asking, do you find that there's a difference in the behavior of different colors, a difference in the weight that causes specific movement? So I think they're referring to the viscosity of the glass, and some colors are more stiff than others. So can you speak to how that affects your work?
Yeah, particularly with the cast glass, that's how I achieved sort of a lot of the layering. So the softer colors will move more readily. So it takes a lower temperature for them to start moving, whereas the harder colors requires a higher temperature. So it means you'll get a different variation in movement when you combine those colors, but also due to the different metals within the color, it means that you will have heavier colors moving further than you do the lighter colors. People have probably seen sort of shots at the bar where people layer liquors. It's actually quite similar. You're able to achieve a similar thing within the glass. There's a lot of research involved. It's taken me quite a lot of years to sort of figure out how the different glasses behave, because not do the different colors behave differently, but different colors from different manufacturers behave differently. And it doesn't always work, and it's taken a lot of R&D to sort of get to that point.
Well, it was really incredible to see the photos of your inspiration and how you were able to really capture that in your works. Was really special to see that. And we'd love to now take a tour of the show behind you in the gallery. Again, this is at London Glassblowing, and it is a show with Tim Rawlinson and Peter Layton. So take it away, Tim.
Cool. Thank you, Richard. So I will just, let's turn my camera around. So yeah, it's only opened last night. So this is very much a preview. So this is one of my Echoes of Light pieces. And that has then this as a new sort of milky interior as well for the piece. Hopefully it's coming through okay in the video. These are some new pieces made with the team here. So part of the sort of transition with me at London Glass Blowing is to work with the blowing team, the more new blown designs rather than just cold work pieces. These are called Kaleidoscope. They're sort of based upon inspiration with stained glass. Trying to create that quality in the work. And above is Peter's Aurora series, which is a new body of work he's done, influenced and inspired by Northern Lights, the Aurora Borealis. The sort of broader shot of the galleries give you an idea of the space here. And in the back, we have our hot shop, which is currently off the summer maintenance. But yeah, you can see how we sort of have like sort of compact way. These are Peter's solid wave sculptures. These are solid bits of glass. He's been going to Devereux and Husky Studio in Wiltshire. They make these very large scale pieces, fully hot finished. And this one then is on a base. It's been the threaded black glass. These are some of the Hepworth shapes that I've been sort of working on, these more organic forms. And here are these inner world pieces, which they have some brand new ones coming to Duncan very soon. If people are in Florida, they'll be able to see these in person. These are ones working on the idea of having a sort of different exterior and different interior color. You can see the sort of bubble then looks like it's floating within. So I just like that element of curiosity and illusion. And sort of what is it that we're actually seeing? And this is the development of Peter's Aurora series. A nice large scale bodies of work. A newer square form of Echoes of Light, which is called elliptical. And yeah, these are the new platters that I've made with the team here. Which, yeah, I really, really enjoy making these. The way that you sort of get the folds in the color, I have to use a large pair of tweezers, really grab hold of the color and manipulate it. It's a lot like pulling toffee about the sweets. And yeah, really pleased with the way that it sort of comes through. And I thought the purple color sort of going with sort of regal Renaissance feel sort of really added to that. These are Peter's platters, his wall pieces. Like a vortex sort of pulls through. This is one of the parallax pieces that I mentioned earlier, having that more twisted organic exterior. So it's a blown bubble that's through the middle. There's no green in this piece, it's just yellow and blue, but that creates the illusion of the color. These are some of Peter's Cloud series, so working with Mr. Devereux to make these very large scale pieces. These are very thick, heavy pieces of glass, and they're cut and polished on the front. Yeah, the inspiration of clouds. Peter loves his clouds. He's a sky gazer, which is the title of the show, Glass Heaven. It's how we're inspired by what's above us. This is another version of the sort of Inner World series, but with a sandblasted interior, so it almost looks like a sort of moon floating within the sphere. Some work here by some of the other resident artists in the team. So we've got Bruce Marks, the birds up here, and Sarah Wibley, both work in the studio. These bottles are by Louis Thompson, who's one of the main glass blowers. And Lane Rose made these fantastic new pieces, which are, he's we used to work for Peter for 20 years, has his own studio. These castings are by Colin Reed, who's probably the most established and well-known glass sculptor in the UK. I'm very lucky to have a few of his absolutely stunning pieces. The way that they sort of bend and refract the light is really quite remarkable. And I'll very quickly just show you where I spend most of my time. So behind the scenes, this is the cold shop. So they have the saw and the flat grinders, and the reciprolap's still working while I'm talking. So that's good. Okay, I'll come back to. So I'd just like to say a big thank you for everyone at the AACG for asking me to do this talk today, and I hope everyone's enjoyed it, and I'd welcome any questions that anyone has. I hope I do my best to answer them.
Thank you so much, Tim. It really was a pleasure to have you on the program. Your pieces are just so incredibly vibrant, and the way that you're able to use color and form to magnify the optical qualities of the glass is really fascinating. And your work is really, really quite incredible. We have one more question from
Thank you very
someone
much.
in the chat, wondering when you're working in the hot shop, they are asking if the process is only gathering and turning, but no blowing.
No, most of the pieces are blown. Usually be a very small bubble. And what I like then is the benefit of blowing. You create this inner cavity, which a sculptor would take forever to try and sort of carve away, but created so effortlessly just by a simple act of blowing into the glass. So yeah, always have a small bubble, kind of like the way that it acts the lens to reflect in on itself. But then also the layers of color all have to be blown. So nearly all my color that's in the piece starts off as a colored cup. So most of my time in the hot shop, I'll spend blowing colored cups and making these different layers of color.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again. I know that you're getting quite the heat wave over there, and I think you said it's the first time that you've actually had to turn off the furnace due to how hot it is. So thank you for sort of bearing with that and being here to do the presentation. Please also thank Peter Layton and London Glass Blowing for us. And again, thank you to Rago Wright Auctions for being our sponsor. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now. And if you want to stay on, I'm sure people would like to thank you and talk to you directly.
Cool. Thank you very much. I am. Thank you to everyone that was has watched and attended. Much appreciated.